Ms. Talbot, roll call, please.
Mr. Borroy,
Present.
Mr. Jinks,
Here.
Ms. Nichols,
Here.
Chairman Orris,
Here.
Ms. Pavano, Mr. Slocum,
Here.
Mr. Talbot,
Here.
Mr. Veliver,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
and we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Talbot. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Whoa.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag of the
United
United
States
States
of America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which it
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and
Justice for all.
justice
for all.
Okay, thank you all for being available for this special meeting. As you know, we have a limited agenda this evening. We did that purposely so that we can give appropriate time to hear the presentation from Weston and Sampson regarding Bartlett Park. And then obviously we have the one personnel matter, which we've all discussed already, and I think we're prepared to advance. So with that, I'm going to move on to the first item on the agenda, which is Weston and Sampson Bartlett Park Public Input Phase Kickoff. I know we have Mr. Gawlak, our Director of Park and Rec, and members of Sampson, Weston and Sampson as well to help with the presentation. And just so you all know, this is really the kickoff of really the public presentation portion of this. As you know, they've been compiling a lot of data, put together some preliminary beginning plans, and this is the beginning presentation to us, which will then follow with more public presentation to facilitate more input from the public. And then I guess finally, based on that, it'll come back to us as a council for final deliberation as to what we choose to do with any of the proposals, if anything. So Sean or John, am I correct in what I just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So with that, we'll turn it over to either you, John, and or Weston and Sampson for the presentation. Thank you for being here.
Sure. So just really quick, I did send out to Sean just before the meeting a timeline of when we did kick off this whole master plan. You should have gotten it via email. We didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, as Ryan wanted to dive right into the executive summary draft. But you could take a look where this process started back in June 25th of 2019 to where we are in the present. And you're right, Councilman Orris, that this is the kickoff and a review by the council with, some discussion, but we didn't want to dive deep into a lot of the concepts and cost items because we wanted the general public to kind of get a chance to grapple with this, digest it, give us some additional feedback. And then from that point there, Weston and Sampson will take a little time to incorporate any new information and then develop a master final plan so that we can come back to the council for all of the discussion and review necessary and then possible action either way. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ryan. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, John. Thank you, council members, for giving us the opportunity to speak before you tonight, and Sean and John for guiding the process along. Before I get into the PDFs of the executive summary, just also want to applaud the town for really having the vision of a citizen first approach when developing this master plan. Some previous concepts that were done historically without really engaging the public and the citizens of Cheshire. And I think we've really made strides with getting public input, public comment, vetting it with the committee, other members from the town, and here we are today. So I'm excited to get this process going and really releasing it to the public. It's really exciting. So I'm just going to flip through the executive summary here and really just give general highlights of each of the pages without belaboring it too much. Hopefully everyone got a chance to read through it. It's been reviewed a couple times, still in draft form, as John said. We still have public input to add to this. But really, you know, it's a 10-acre parcel of land, Bartland Park South. And, you know, the town saw it as a valuable parcel of green space and open space. And what do you really do with it? Its adjacency to Bartland Park makes it a very, very valuable asset to the town. When we first started the process, we really looked at that parcel. We dove in deep, but we didn't only focus on that specific parcel. We had to look globally at the town of Cheshire. What is it, the 28th best place in the United States to live? What assets you guys had in town, and what are you really missing? Because of the adjacency to Bartland Park, the athletic fields that are predominant there right now, the swimming pool, community garden, we looked at a town-wide inventory of what all your current athletic fields are, to see if we wouldn't be missing something if this were a solid opportunity to gain and grow your athletic field program. We took that high-level overview to see if, yes, this is the right place for it and you have the need, or, well, maybe you could use other assets in town, improve other assets in town, and you'll be fine. And so really the conclusion we came to is that you do have the appropriate amount of fields in town to support your athletic programs. It's just a matter of how you mix and match and work with the Board of Education. A lot of the fields and facilities are on school properties and are potentially unutilized now, mainly due to condition of the fields. Then looking directly at the site in a big picture, some of the things that influence the design. You have heavy traffic along Route 10. Everybody knows about that. Cheshire High School right across the street, shared parking for Cheshire High School. There's we call natural riparian corridor or Mill River along the east side of the property. Also surrounding neighborhoods, surrounding residential areas on really 270 degrees of the park, and some also on the west side of Route 10. And your ADA access, a big component of parks systems these days and municipal facilities, is making sure that you make it accessible for all, especially when we start introducing more opportunity for senior citizens, elderly, people that may have physical abilities, challenged to get around the site just like everyone else could. So we started really engaging the public. The kickoff was the Cheshire Fall Festival in 2019. Set up a pop-up tent, had great attendance. You can see John there in action in the top right, speaking with a bunch of people, reviewing some of the potentials for the site. We ran, this was a postcard we developed for that meeting, and you know, we tried to collect as much data as we possibly can through a SurveyMonkey, which was available at that time. It was published online, sent out to multiple user groups. And this word cloud was a fun way to see what were the major key words coming out of that SurveyMonkey. And you could see splash pad and trails and nature. Some sports were in there. So everyone had that nature-based approach towards what they'd like to see. It was actually quite surprising. I thought I was going to get a huge contingency of athletic programs really speaking out for additional fields, but through personal interviews with stakeholders and collecting the data from 1,200 respondents from the town, it was important, but having a strong town green, get that New England feel, old New England feel to Cheshire could be a valuable asset and something that may attract young families to move to town. Along with that, entertainment venue, something for the arts, getting something in there. So we went through, you could see in the upper right corner, we literally took all those different program elements, and we even had discussions about indoor fitness centers, ice rinks, hockey rinks. What was the right fit here and what made sense from a physical space sense, what fits on the site for your program use. What could your site support for parking? You're pretty tight on parking now, and adding any other heavy use to the site might be not the right thing to do based on impervious surface and being able to control the stormwater. So we took those physical objects, moved them around in site, made a list of what should go on the site through programming, and then we started having some fun with some sketches. And I went through probably a couple rolls of trace, just looking at the opportunity of how do we get the right program on site without affecting the whole park. That was a real challenge. One of the concepts was to have this was an early on sketch, was the great lawn and town green right up front along Route 10. Have it a combined space and really have it front and center. We're proud to have this town green. After going through some more sketches and options, we only didn't put the pen to paper and looking at trace. We also looked at costs of all these different things, which is very important at that very preliminary stage. We didn't want to design the Taj Mahal and have everyone excited about it and not be able to afford it. So really, concept one is we talk about core improvements. The core improvements are improvements to Bartland Park South parcel. That was the main focus of this master plan study. We took the liberties of making sure it tied into the rest of the park and made sense, but concept one, core improvements, really include a smaller town green front and center along Route 10 and a larger outdoor great lawn that allows for passive recreation, unprogrammed space for everyday citizens to come, not organized sports. You can have an event stage here that hosts summer concert series, yoga classes, performing arts, really any outdoor class or outdoor venue here, and which increases the income potential for Park and Recs as well. We have some stormwater management that's required. The Mill River watershed, there was a study done for the town. You have your MS4 requirements where we have to look for opportunities to take stormwater runoff, slow it down before it gets into that Mill River, and provide good water quality. We also added some parking spaces up here, mainly for ADA access and expansion of parking and having a drop off and pick up should there be a larger event here. There's also an area dedicated for the Veterans Memorial, sized and located in an opportune spot. It's at a high point on site. There's great views of the entire park from that area, as well as respecting the citizens of the adjacent neighborhood. You can see how close they are. So we provided some evergreen screening. The location of the event stage also is outward facing towards Route 10. So sound and noise was a consideration when we located this, as well as sun and topography, utilizing the existing grades that are out here to make everything work. This smaller town green.
Hey, Ryan,
Yeah.
Just real quick, sorry, it's Sean. Would you be able to put on, I think one of your next slides is the larger map. Is it possible to see it a little easier for folks to see?
Sure, let me.
Or can you zoom in at all?
Yeah, let me do that.
Just might be easier because folks
Yeah,
are
I
kinda
actually
watching
have
on
the,
TV, so.
I'll just do these one by one because they're the full. There we go.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Good. So here, the town green can hold a variety of different events. You could rent it out for parties. You can have tree lighting in here, and it would be graded out completely horizontal or completely level, where if the weather was cooperative, you could have a winter ice skating here as well. There's a small playground area for a nature-based play program. So really, the other thing that's important on this plan are all the white highlighted pathways are accessible pathways to all of your recreational facilities, including all the backstops, the player bench areas, spectator viewing areas, etc. In this particular concept 1A, as we zoom out to the bigger picture, a couple other key factors here was having this curb cut along Route 10, a secondary means of egress, as well as additional parking within the heart of the park. We looked at, do we put parking out here? Do we expand parking in different areas? But really putting parking in areas where they'll serve the new development, as well as divide up parking for the existing development. You have a small existing lot here and some another smaller lot over here. So really the circulation frees up traffic a little bit and provides more parking. Concept 1A, these three fields here, M2, M3, M4, and 5, 6, 7. M2 and 3 and 5, 6, 7 are poor draining, and it's a challenge for cancellations, for hosting practices, for early spring practices. It's really the worst time for scheduling. And so really we identified the need for drainage improvements here, as well as here. There's also seemed to be an appetite for, can we fit a multi-purpose synthetic turf field in town? And based on the square footage, we could fit a full-size football field shown in back with two overlapping lacrosse fields as they're striped today to fit in that area. Again, it's lighted, and if we were to expand this use out here, it's not really expanding the use, but really expanding the capability of use and the amount that it could be used. We also expanded the parking to support that feature. In the center, we maintained the M4. It's a fairly well draining field now, but it's heavily used because of it being a better performing field. I'll move on to option 1B. So as you can see, option 1B really.
Sean, and just try to, or should, if we have questions about each option, we should hold off till we've seen all three options? Do you want us to hold off on any questions about the options until we get through all three options?
Yeah,
I think either way, it's probably best to get through them all, and then we can always pull them up and go back to each one if that works.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. I have a couple questions on this one and on others as well. But I just
Yep.
figured it's easier probably to see them all
Sure.
three, and then we'll go back. Thanks.
That works.
so option 1B, this whole portion of Bartland Park South remains the same from 1A. What we've done is rotated the improvements on each of these fields. One is we moved the synthetic turf and lighting away from the corner of the field in adjacency to the neighbors, located at the heart of the park with lighting, should it become an issue. Except with today's modern day lighting, and I have a picture of a project we just completed in a contentious neighborhood in Walpole, Mass. And it's amazing what technology does today in terms of light spill and glare. if we put a synthetic turf field rectangle use in here, we would reconstruct a baseball field. This could be a baseball area. And as you're reconstructing, you make those drainage improvements that are necessary. The softball field, we show it as being reoriented into optimal north-northeast orientation for sun glare issues. That's just for player safety. Can it be done without that? Yes, right now, but that is one of those phased approaches. We've expanded the parking a little bit up here just to make it, not really expanded it, but make use of the area that you already have dedicated and formalize it so it's it's well defined and you can maximize the amount of parking back there versus just being a kind of a free-for-all gravel driveway approach. And then also added a turnaround. Should someone drive all the way down here, all the spots are taken, they could turn around and circulate back into the park. And then option 2 was really just taking a look and saying, this was that great lawn town green at the front and center of the park. Adding another curb cut a little bit offset from the existing roadway here. Really pushing the limits of getting vehicular circulation along the perimeter and having it come through, and trying to clean up some of the circulation with some traffic circles or roundabouts, rather than having people stop and potentially back up along Route 10. This option here also shows the expansion of parking and multi-purpose athletic field up here, synthetic turf. Because we are offsetting 2 softball fields, we would reconstruct M2 and 3 with facing softball diamonds, and at the same time take care of drainage improvements, showing that you could fit a soccer field overlay over here. And then when you get into the heart of the park, this option displaces the existing skate park. So we provide a location for it here. Added some basketball or volleyball courts over here, or this could be another potential satellite parking lot. And stormwater management, open air pavilion overlooking the meadow, and still having the same features as the evergreen privacy screening and Veterans Memorial up here. Also mentioning all the concepts, it shows a splash pad adjacent to the existing pool facility. And that's really just identified based on the size of the space that's available, a potential area for a splash pad. So with this, do you want me to go into costs? Do you want to go, while it's fresh on your mind, talk about some of the questions you had on each of the concepts?
Right, can you just show that wall pool, just the lights that affected his house?
Yeah, sure. So this is the recent project we did. Again, this is a dual field. It's a 6-pole system, and you can see in the background all the neighbors in the back with their lights shining through. This was a drone shot looking down the site. This is a sand-based athletic field, baseball, softball facing fields. Both could be used concurrently based on the spacing. You have a couple of field overlays that you could utilize here in terms of rectangle fields. And additionally, this light was also the spill into the parking lots was, you could see the LED lights along the back edge of the parking. That's really how all of these parking lots are lit. It's not, has nothing to do with spill off of the sports field lighting.
Thanks.
Yep.
Brian, why don't you go back and we'll entertain questions and then we can get into the different costs and phases and options.
Sure.
We'll open it up to questions. Dave?
Yeah, if I could, I noticed that on 2 of the 3 plans, the maps that we had, if you're putting the synthetic field in the back, you're expanding the parking, probably because of the increased use and whatnot, but you're eliminating for the second time now in this park, the community gardens and moving them, but I didn't see where they were moved to.
Right, we had discussed that, and in terms of community gardens, Sean, was there another parcel in town that was thought of for that? It's one of those items that has really a lot of flexibility in terms of where it can be relocated.
Well, except the
Yeah, I don't
relocation
think,
itself is an issue, as we knew when we moved it 20 years ago or so.
right, yeah, I think that's definitely a consideration. And again, I don't, that specific, option was ideal for the parking should the more heavily used turf area be located there. But you're correct that there's no location proposed for the relocation on this plan. But we would have to have that conversation and consideration for sure.
Thank you.
AV?
Yep. Thank you. That was actually my first question as well. I noticed that too, that the community gardens had been wiped out on concept 1A and 2. On a couple other things I was down, I guess what you show here on 1A is optional softball field. You've relocated the softball field. So on a couple of these plans right now, there are 2 softball fields in that location. The one right when you come in on the right, which is facing, I guess southeast. So, and then there's another field sort of up where the new parking lot would go between this existing baseball field and the optional field. So at this point, it seems like in most of these concepts, we're wiping out at least the softball field down here. So if we do that on 1A, do we still have enough softball fields? I know when you get to concept 2 and I guess on both in concept 1s, you end up with only 1 softball field instead of 2 softball fields. You get to concept 2, you add the 2 softball fields out there as you show it. But right now, that's the only concept that has 2 softball fields. Everybody else has 1 softball field. So there's sort of a net loss of 1 sort of field out in that area. And I just wanted to make sure without calculating, is that still enough softball fields to address the needs?
Based on our inventory identification through the initial process and meeting with all the groups, the organizations, where they're at currently, what the trend is, there's more than enough town space. It's just now a matter of maintenance and taking care of some of those locations, like
All right.
at the Highland School. You
Right.
have two fields there that certainly with just a little TLC can be pressed into action, and it gives us the flexibility to maybe do something here different with Bartlam and just relocate that somewhere else.
Okay. And that's fine. That was going to be my follow-up question to this was you, Ryan had mentioned this issue of in the part of the survey, as we all know, some of the school fields are available, but not always available for proper usage because of their condition. And so I wasn't sure if you were taking some of those fields into consideration with not only would there be work here, but those fields would obviously have to be upgraded and adjusted as well to put them into better rotational use. Correct?
Yeah, and there's not a lot of work that has to be done, Dave.
Okay.
We with the whole COVID and trying to get things going, and then the Cheshire when we had the install of the new lights at Cheshire Park, where we had to shut down a couple of fields. The Board of Ed was really gracious in mobilizing and getting a vendor to do some work to the Doolittle School field and to the one of the Highland School fields, just so that men's softball had a home to play their full schedule basically all summer long. So, some minor backstop work and maybe some fencing, a little clay and just a little TLC and cutting the infield, maybe getting rid of some lips. You're not talking about a huge expense, but making better use of your school facilities that you already have parking facilities. You have a lot of all that already there. So it just made sense to be able to be a little bit more creative with this plan and have that flexibility to eliminate of all the different facilities, a softball field, because you have plenty in the inventory.
Okay. Question, actually, on the map that you have up now, 1B, in the new baseball / lacrosse field, my question is, I know that the trend now seems to be to put out fencing around most fields, like when it comes to baseball, so that there is a definitive home run fence out there. So I guess my question is, can you have a baseball / lacrosse field overlay during baseball season, or do you just not have an outfield fence when you're using that field? I know
you could put a fence on that particular field. Just center field probably might be a 540-foot shot. It'd be great.
Okay. I'm just curious, because I can see that obviously there's the outline of a baseball, where it would end, and that would then eliminate the ability to use either lacrosse field if there was a wall. That's all. That's all. I'm just curious so during baseball season, you wouldn't really be able to use the lacrosse fields if you were planning on putting a wall up, like for example that the women do at the high school for their softball field. The high school softball field puts up a temporary fence, which pretty much creates a wall there because they need a fence for their games. So I was just curious if that was contemplated, because right now there's no wall or there's no fence for the current existing baseball field. I just wasn't sure if there was going to be one on that one. One other thing I have is the current trails that are there now, that we put in as temporary trails, which have been very popular for many people for passive recreation and stuff. Are those being sort of replaced by these sort of walking trails out here, sort of above the pool and the great lawn? Is that what's going to be? Because I know one of the things that people like is the fact that they're a little soft and sort of, they're not hard, they're not necessarily hard like concrete. They're, a nicer trail. And so I was just curious, right now there's a lot of walking that you can do on the sidewalks, but I guess the question is, are these walking trails going to be sort of open milled trails through the woods, or is there, how are those going to be so that there's still like a soft walking path as opposed to walking on concrete everywhere?
Right. We went into that discussion quite a bit during the process coordinating with the town planner and engineer, and in the trails you would have you can have a stabilized stone dust or the similar material that you use today. It would meet ADA, it's ADA compliant. But this walking system around here, you want to be a little more formal and long-term durability. And still, there's a lot of green in here, surrounded by trees, there's lawn. You really still get a chance to walk through this meadow area. So I would say your core improvement areas, especially around the Great Lawn and the town green, should be more formalized. And if you want to make this path along the outside of a different material, yeah, that would make sense.
Okay, I'm just saying, I do know a lot of people enjoy that path as it currently is, and the consistency, or I should say the softness of it. It's it's nice to walk on. It's stable, but still not walking on concrete, and they enjoy that. And I just want to make sure if there's going to be some place for people to walk that, the walkways are great. And I understand why, especially if they're going to be handicapped accessible, you're going to need them to be more firm. But I was just curious if there was going to be places that are a little bit more soft for some of them. And I do like the concepts, that you have here. I especially enjoy, the idea that, trying to create a buffer there between what's going on and Stonegate. I know that's was a big concern to them, and also the people who live out there on Newbridge Circle who were behind the pool and what's going to happen there as well. So, so I think that's mostly it. But I did want to just one quick question. In the last plan that was touted before we did this, or at least had been put out there, there was a concept of moving the tennis courts from the high school across the street and putting tennis onto this park land. And I was just curious, obviously that's not happening here. And I was just curious if that was discussed and taken into consideration. I know there had always been that discussion of that would free up parking at the high school for some of those students, and also eliminate the need for some of those students to always cross Route 10 after school and get to their parking in Bartlett. And so I was just curious if that was taken into consideration as well.
Yes, we did discuss that and went back and forth. And actually, this area here, it is a court area, let's say. And depending on the final outcome and input, it could be programmed really for anything. But the courts are concrete courts. The adjacency to the Park and Rec house, and them being recently constructed as a post-tension concrete,
Right.
kind of, they're there for long haul, and to utilize them for parking would almost be a shame. It'd probably be one of your most expensive parking lots you ever put in. Parking
Right,
space
right.
you ever put in, besides a garage deck, high-rise type of situation.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for these plans. I know there's a lot of different opportunities, and I like the idea of the town green and the great lawn and the event stage. So, be interested to see how this plays out. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, Mr. Slocum, of course.
Thank you, Chairman. I just would like to express my appreciation for the front lawn being the front lawn as proposed, the town green. I think that's an excellent idea. I know most of us have played in our backyards, and necessarily we have softball fields right on Route 10. And I'm not adverse to that, but I do like the concept of the greening up of the park. I think that's an excellent idea, and that may go to cost. I can't judge the scale of that, but it appears to be larger than a football field. How much space is that actually consuming of the acreage? The one that's, say, right on Route 10, the oval on Route 10. Yeah, which I prefer just visually. I like the whole idea of it. It's a grassy green area that you drive by, and it looks attractive.
Right. So this, let's do a little fun exercise here. This lacrosse field can fit within this rectangle. And so that's
Hey,
about
Ryan,
100
can I interrupt you for a minute? I don't know if everyone else, I can't see what you're pointing to. So
You
when
can't
you're
see my
referencing
cursor?
things, I can't see your pointer, so it's making it hard, at least for me, to follow where you are. Is there any
Okay.
way you can enlarge that?
Enlarge my pointer.
Yeah, because you're referencing things that I just can't see what you're talking about. I don't know if anyone else is having that issue. So you say over here, but I don't see what you're pointing to.
Here, can you see the hand better?
Yeah, try the hand.
Can you see the hand?
Yeah, barely.
That looks better to
than
me.
it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know how to change it from that. That's I think the best I could do right now. And I zoomed in a bit. So if you look at the size of the lacrosse field up here, that fits within this area here. It'll be tight pinch on the corners. And generally speaking, a full-size soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, football, you're talking about a little under 100,000 square feet.
So it's a sizable chunk
Yeah.
of land. Now, with the traffic flow, I mean, I know how people are with rotaries. I see you've created a few in there. Is that a traffic flow on a busy pattern where the green would being used, so to speak, that would function well? I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think about your design?
Well, what I think about is that during an event, if you have a large scale event here, I would actually close off the access between the two.
Mhm.
And this could be used, you could pull vendor trucks along here and really make this a, are they food trucks or something like that that supports this larger event? And so you would really stop the traffic flow between the two.
Okay.
This area was more functioning as a drop-off area as well. You can see it's lined with sidewalks, and this was merely a connection between both points of circulation. Still wanted to be able to get in and out here, and also access the rest of the park. We had some concepts that didn't have this cross connection here and actually connected through the park, but we felt that it really broke up the amount of open green space in the green space corridor. So we really tried to maximize the green on the site.
Now, as a follow-on question to just, public use beyond the ball fields, it appears in the plan that we're looking at that you've really maintained quite a lot of walking trail or foot traffic pathways. Is that what those white lines would indicate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I think one thing that at least a small number of people in town have appreciated is just what Park and Public Works had done, placing some fields in some footpaths in that new area, and they are used. Has this more or less kept about the same amount of pathways in that area, or has it even enhanced them some?
I think it has enhanced them to some degree. You could actually see some of them they're hard to see, but there's white dashed lines in the backdrop. And so I would say reconfigured, added. So in this particular area, it's probably equal.
Okay.
But Tim, if I could just jump in there, that was something that was a source of a lot of conversation and a lot of feedback we heard from the public. Just to your point, that people really appreciated the ability to walk there. And one thing we heard a lot was sort of as an alternative in a way to our wonderful hike and bike path right in the middle of town. But there are some walkers who feel it'd be nice to have a non-bicycle space, if you will, that's really more for walking, and you don't have to worry as much about folks riding their bike maybe at a faster speed and whatnot. And we've heard that feedback from folks that if you could, and it was important to kind of we were looking for a way to kind of loop around all of Bartlett, not only to attach the Chapman parcel to the overall park, but as an option for whatever that is, 1.6 or 2 mile loop around the park, if possible. And that may be at a later phase or whatever, as we start talking about the master plan. But that was the feedback we heard a lot, kind of to your point, that people are looking for a place to walk, maybe more in a park-like setting and without concern about maybe some high-speed cyclists coming through. So just kind of echoing what you said.
And then my final question is this: with respect to creating a town green, so to speak, I just don't recall what you said in all your planning. Did you give up any fields? Was there a sacrificial field that's not there?
In this plan,
Mm-hmm.
we have, I would say you sacrifice a rectangle field in this plan by displacing the softball fields over here. However, that's one of the reasons why the synthetic turf came into play, because you could run that thing
Multi-purpose,
as long as you're
yeah.
allowed to by town code, how late you could light it, and by people's ability to play after school and on the weekends.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. It's sometimes of the year you can sort of double your usage of a field with lights because it's not, you're playing after 5:30, obviously, until you can play.
I can't see everybody, so I thought I saw Miss Nichols.
Yeah, I do have a question. First of all, John, I communicated this to you before, and I will say it publicly. I think I'm very impressed with the fact that you've listened to all the community, excuse me, input and really tried to incorporate the ideas in any one of these plans that you have proposed. There's a couple of questions that I have in this particular plan. I feel like there seems to be an awful lot of driveway space to go around these little turnaround places. And I'm wondering if that is taking away parking spaces, which I think are always at a premium in any kind of a plan like this. So does that eliminate parking places and provide much more impervious surface to this park? It's hard to tell the proportion when you're just looking at the picture. It seems
Ryan,
like
you want to
300.
go through that chart, Ryan?
300
Sure.
spaces.
On this one, any park space that we lost in this area by having the circulation through,
Right.
we've gained by reconfiguring here.
okay.
So we've added a few spaces here. Here we've added the 52. So if you look at this concept too, what's existing for, let's see, we'll just go from the top down to make it easy to follow. So existing for M567, that's all the way up here. We have 35 spaces right now. We're showing concept 2 has 130 spaces. Cheshire Community Pool parking here, existing is 126. We're adding 32.
Okay.
M123 field, that's this parking lot here. We have no change.
Okay.
And then the skate park, that's this parking area. We had 55 existing. We're adding 38
Good.
for a total of 93. And then the event stage, that's this parking lot.
Right.
We add another 52. So the total proposed parking on site is 602 versus 350. So we have a net gain of 250 spaces.
Okay, so because that always is an issue. And I liked your comment about connecting the two turnarounds by using that crossway road that connected those two as a service area for potentially for food trucks or for whatever. I think that's a good utilization of that space because it's accessible from both the Great Lawn and from the fields should we have a big event that extends like a fall festival where we may have something on the fields. My next question is in this particular version, we have the stormwater management area to the east and south, which was the Great Lawn and the other proposals. Is that just mowed fields? What is the surface there? And is that a place where people still could go out and fly a kite or throw a Frisbee?
Sure. That's going to come down to hydrology and what the subsoils are. And if we're infiltrating versus holding and discharging. So there's a lot of unknown on that right now. But generally speaking, we want to have it so it holds that first flush of water and then it drains off at the same rate that it does today or improves the quality. So in terms of, infiltration is ideal. Above ground infiltration is much more cost effective than below ground infiltration, but these could be designed with an under drain at the bottom so they won't stay wet for more than 24 or 48 hours.
Okay, so that does become a questionable use not necessarily a potential place where we could build something else. It's going to have to be reserved entirely.
And what you see a lot, oftentimes that is overlooked. It's one of those unfortunate things. You have to dedicate an area for stormwater, but this area here is already so natural. It's already a low point. We could really make it a, if you do the right planting mix in there, it'll make it look like a meadow versus
Wonderful.
being an engineered stormwater management system.
Okay, and I don't remember the first two where we managed all the
Yeah.
stormwater. This seems like this would manage more water than the first two, but I can't remember where you had those.
Yeah.
Okay, in a lower.
So this
Yeah,
one
all
here,
right, yeah.
actually, it probably manages the same, if not more. We've just divided up. We've divided and conquered. So we've, divide and conquer is probably a more desirable approach in that you have more chance for water infiltration and better water quality versus
Okay.
just having everything in a hurry to one spot, you're raising up and then slowly settling. Here, if you design it correctly, you do have potentially better stormwater quality.
And those are going to drain the property so that we don't have the water problems on the fields. I mean, if it's laid out properly.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Those are really for the increase in impervious and the sidewalks. It's not a, the parking lots are the biggest increase in impervious and additional roads. The walkways have some in an event stage, but the field drainage itself is, a little different of an animal. It's its own issue. These fields here are more about soil compaction and subsurface conditions versus water running onto the fields causing a problem, as well as based on the soil types and you really in soil conditions below, they really should be either graded with a higher percentage slope, but then that becomes less desirable for athletic field play. So
it's a give and take no matter what.
Right.
So I like just a couple of comments. The comments that my other counselors raised about the community garden was an issue that I noticed at the very beginning. And the other issue, I think it was David who brought up, was the baseball fields and the ability perhaps to use the school fields. And the only thing that concerns me slightly about that is that we are in a school modernization mode. And we are right now looking at the uses of the properties where the schools are. Should we need to use some of those fields to expand any parts of the buildings, is there flexibility in this, in any of the plans that we might choose that we're considering here, to be able to include those fields that we would otherwise have moved from the Bartlam Park to go to, say, Highland School? Supposing we had to make an addition on Highland School and we had to give up those fields at Highland School, is there enough other place to have fields in town? That's all. Because these projects are going to be somewhat concurrent on a time frame. And I wouldn't want to accept this proposal based on something that might change when the school modernization proposal came along. On the other hand, we can't wait for the completion of every project, but we need to be flexible, I guess is where I'm at. And that's
yeah, so I'm going through a town-wide athletic field master plan in Greenwich right now, and they have a lot of fields, but they also have some issues going on at their schools with the need for remediation of some of the sports fields. And, their programming is very tight in town, and, they literally have to shut down probably 2, 3, 4, potentially 4 fields to able to do the remediation and then reconstruct them back. So where's the swing space?
Yeah.
And so as part of that townwide study, we've identified several of the parcels that they may have a bit of extra real estate, or if you mix and match and reconfigure, that it will work and you will still be able to support your robust sports program. And then in the long term, you make those improvements in the short term to support your current program, but in the long term, it provides park and recs in the schools greater flexibility of scheduling and less wear and tear on your fields, which also reduces some of the maintenance and replacement and long-term expenditures for these fields.
Good. So that's a consideration we need to consider when we're doing modernization as well. I mean, it's just a potential work together spot. So,
Yeah, and one of the things, one of the biggest things to help out with that is a synthetic turf field, because you can really run the heck out of that field without any detriment to the conditions below your feet in any weather at any time. So for scheduling and dependability of scheduling, losing some fields for the interim, putting in an additional synthetic turf field makes a lot of sense.
okay, I think that for the moment answers my questions. I had the same tennis court question. But to me, I think you really, any one of these proposals has addressed most of the concerns that I've heard from residents. I like the town green concept. I think it boils down to dollars and it boils down to input from the rest of the town. So, but I appreciate the work because you really worked hard to be thoughtful about how to manage the space.
Sure. Just one consideration between the town green concept on the Great Lawn up front versus the first two concepts. This was really driven by having more intimate events and being able to have that smaller, it's still sizable, but smaller space in a Great Lawn event area, where if you were trying to host a personal event, or a more intimate event, it would almost get lost in the sheer size of that Great Lawn. So that's one advantage that this plan has over
Yeah,
there.
I happen to prefer that. I felt it was more small town, but I can see Tim's point to having it be visible. I like that on this one we're looking at now that you've considered the residents with the stage facing north or northwest. I mean, so that the sound will not be as impactful to them. And I like this plan because you put the turf field in the center of the park where it's less impactful for the neighbors and you still have room for the community gardens. So for me, there's some potential there. But either way, it's a good beginning. And I think it's reflective of a lot of positive input. And so kudos, job well done.
Thanks.
Because this so closely relates to Sylvia's question, the softball field that's adjacent to the smaller town green, there's not a field there now. Am I correct on that?
There is a field there now. So
Okay, so that's no closer than the current field that we see driving by.
correct. If you look, you can actually see the ghost of it underneath.
Oh, okay,
here.
fine. Okay. That helps me. I'm just trying to gain some perspective on it because that just seems so close to Route 10. But okay, thank you.
Other
Related to that, if I
Councilor
could just
John
ask,
Walsh?
doesn't that mean that we're losing that field if we put the Great Lawn right up on Route 10? Because I don't see it someplace else on the maps.
On the other concept.
Yes.
Yeah, so we
there were
lose,
two
actually, we
facing
lose
each
both
other.
fields. We lose both fields and we're shifting them over here to where M4 or 5 is, and we lose, M2 and 3 is, and we lose probably one rectangle field.
So by putting the Great Lawn a little further away and having the town green as what's right up against Route 10, we keep this, we don't lose any fields. We actually keep the same or maybe gain some the way you reconfigure it. And we have the Great Lawn just a little further away from Route 10.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. First, kudos to the designs. I think they all capture some great ideas. I do want to make one point, though. It would be great to have a town green because although many people think the town green is in the center of town is our town green, it's the First Congregational Church green, and they've been very nice to allow many groups and organizations to use that green. But I think it'd be nice to have something for our town, and I think it's great. Can you go over lighting? I know you're talking about lighting. Where will there be any new lighting? And my concern also is like on either concept where the Great Lawn is, if they're having the fireworks or something and people are there in the evening, what kind of lighting will be available?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'll zoom way in here because you can see didn't really highlight them, but they have been accounted for. There's all these little gray dots along the pathways.
Uh-huh.
And so there would be pedestrian and parking lot lighting throughout
Okay.
so people can safely come in and out of events as necessary.
And on concept 1A and 1B, the skateboard park is staying in the same place, correct?
Correct.
And in concept 2, it's going to be moved,
Correct.
right? Well, I mean, because I know we just spent some money rehabbing that. I'm assuming that we'll just move that equipment. Am I correct on that?
They're just bolted down.
Yeah.
I believe they're relatively, I mean, again, I'm not sure if this proposal, you could do an all new one certainly for a little more money, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, John or Ryan, they can also be moved and repurposed in a different area if needed.
That's correct.
Okay. And the around on both concepts, those are trees that are planted on both sides of it? Those aren't bushes; those are trees, correct?
Trees, correct.
So when I look at this, say there's an event going on. Did you think about putting like a crosswalk through the middle of it? Or the other thing is, I mean, if there's an event, is it handicap accessible for people who want to see the event? Because I mean, all I see is grass, and I don't see a place where those with disabilities could get in there and want to, if they want to be part of the event.
Right. So that's another good question. And, we looked at the programming of the space, and the answer to, are there crossing paths here? Originally, I showed some concepts with that, and it would look like a quadrangle versus an open lawn space. But I would default, I would say you build the perimeter and then just monitor it over time and see if there are any desire lines from people walking, if they're taking like certain paths to get from this side of town, they're walking up and they're cutting across the green and it wears out. Well, then you install pathways.
Yeah, but I'm also concerned about like, somebody in a wheelchair, if there's a concert going on or something and they want to watch it with all the trees and everything, they'd have to sit on a pathway where people be walking by. Is there going to be a place where they can go somewhere?
Yes. So along the front, this one actually, let me see if the other one shows it. This one shows accessing this event stage is comprised of a backdrop and a stage up here. And then this area in front is a hard surface where you'd set up chairs and have an area that's accessible. And if we need to expand that a little bit, depending on final sizing and final configuration, we would do that. But the intent is to have a larger flat area in front for accessible. And if you want to, as a fundraiser for certain events, have rented chair spaces, private seating areas up front.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that we do have some area for those people with disabilities to have a place to sit and enjoy the concerts or whatever is going on. The other thing is when I was saying lights, are we planning on lighting any more of the fields, or is it just the backfield that will be lit?
In this particular one, we show field lighting on field M4 in the baseball field.
Right.
So we do show lighting that, and we show lighting on this synthetic turf field as well.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a great concept, and I'm sure when we start looking at the costs, that will drive how we are going anyway. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Is it Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could bring up, I believe it's 1B. So a couple things. John, first question to John, I think. This one shows that you're going from 3 softball fields down to 1. Is there any concern with the amount of tournaments that are held on those fields that you're not going to be able to have that volume of play in that small area anymore?
No, Peter, we're only losing 1 softball field there. Because we're moving the hardball field. The 90-foot larger baseball fields are at a premium in town, especially with, not getting a lot of use of the high school one. So we just moved that over to the left on the other side of that big parking lot. We're just losing the 1 softball field where it says Town Green.
Right.
You're losing that one there. And that was only because we had the inventory on the school side. Because we still need, there's not enough public softball fields to handle the volume of activities and organizations that Cheshire has currently. But identifying, space that the town already owns at school facilities, like I had said earlier, with some TLC and some minor fence work, you make that work.
Thanks,
Yeah.
John.
And to John's point too, 90-foot diamonds are, they're an asset because they require such an expansive amount of space. Whereas these softball fields have a 200-foot outfield or 220 or 230 at most. So those are a lot easier to mix and match around town versus losing a full 90.
Just as a preference, I prefer having the band shell or the Great Lawn area further away from Route 10, only because it gives it, it takes it away from some of that the traffic noise along Route 10. To that same point, then what you show is the Town Green area. The one thing that's recognizable about what we call the Town Green now is that it's open to Route 10. Is there any consideration to not having the trees right along 10 on the Town Green area and making that maybe a horseshoe of trees so that it is open to Route 10 and gives the appearance of being the Town Green?
That's a good point.
It
I
is
think that's a good idea, personally.
a good idea.
Yeah, this gets into the whole, it's an age-old debate of what's exposed and what's not. Even in like a downtown center, when I'm doing a streetscape for, say, Madison or Branford or other towns that have like that commercial district, and you start talking about streetscape trees, and everyone's concerned about blocking their signage, blocking the views into their stores. They're very protective of that commercial space. We could consider that horseshoe shape. I think by, you plant species that have that upright arching vase shape. So when you're looking in, you still can see into the space, and you won't necessarily, it won't be a line of trees that's blocking your view into that town green. And then what it does is when you're on the town green, it really makes you, you're comforted by that circle of trees. It makes it more intimate of a space. And then also, because of its proximity to Route 10, it kind of gives that separation from the fast moving traffic along Route 10. So there's both sides of the story. And that's something that's easily figured out in the next stage.
The Great Lawn area, am I correct in believing that the grading of that area would have the left-hand side where the circle of trees are, and is higher than where the
That is
event
correct.
stage is.
And in looking at the grades, there's actually where M4 is right now. There's a little raise in grade. It's a quick rise up here. And this is the natural high spot. That's another reason why we located where it was. And then it slowly dies off. We'd have to do some regrading here. And then eventually, as you get towards the end here, you would dip it, you would make it grade off even at a steeper percentage. So if you do have those smaller events, you can stack people up and still see over each other.
What's just approximately what's the change in elevation from the back trees to the event stage front?
Let me just think about that. That is feet. Probably from back here to around this area here, it's 3 to 4 feet, and
Okay.
then it would dip down probably another 5 feet or so. We have preliminary grades that I had put together just to conceptualize the space, and essentially it was a 1.5 to 2% lawn to get your surface drainage, and then up to like a 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 slope down to that event stage area.
Again, preference only, but I like having the synthetic turf field in the middle as opposed to being way in the back by where the pool area is. Not only for the advantage of protecting it from the residents, but I think for the own security of the field, I like having it more visible from the Route 10 area. That being said, if the synthetic turf field is in the center in concept 1B, does that preclude ever having fireworks at this venue again?
That question and concern was raised, and I would say if you had fireworks, they would, I don't know where they'd be launched from. I honestly don't. But you could launch in a fashion where there would be no chance of those adversely affecting the turf.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the work that you put in, and as other members have said, for taking into such great consideration the input from the citizens. We appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mr. Jinks, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's a lot to be excited about here. Thank you very much for presenting these to us tonight. Just a couple quick questions I have is, and sorry if you might have gone over this earlier, about where it says drainage improvements. What happens to that space in those plans?
This space here, M567.
There's two plans that have space for drainage improvements. So.
Yeah, in any of the spaces, the right approach is to dig some test pits, take soil samples, send them off to the lab, either amend the soils or come in with new soils, put a gravel blanket in if it's a groundwater issue, put field under drainage in, irrigation, and really get more of a sand dominant field so it does drain better and perform better.
But then with these plans, those fields are just left to be open. Is that the idea?
Right. Well, right now they're existing. You could see very faintly below the striping for lacrosse right now. So they would be left same program. We would just improve the quality so they could be utilized more.
Okay, I understand. It seems like concept 2, like we're getting maybe more out of the space. Would you describe it that way? The concept 2 is maybe we're getting potentially more use of the existing space with the number of ball fields available?
I don't know if it's more use. I would classify it as, you would actually lose a rectangle field, which, that's not a great thing because the popularity of rectangle sports are increasing as opposed to the diamond sports. So more use.
However, though, Ryan, with the light, with the field being lit, those two fields in the back, or if it's in the set, well, yeah, for this particular concept, with scheduling and being able to go to at least say 9:30, 10 o'clock, you could through scheduling accommodate that field loss.
Right, with the field lights, you could account for that.
Correct.
Yeah, and then to that fact of having two lighted fields, yeah, you would get more use out of this park. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't light two sets of fields on this one either.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, like I said, there's a lot to be excited about here. I don't have a real preference either way. I feel like the town green close to the road is a nice idea. Personally, I like all the trails in the back and the trails kind of around the perimeter of the park. That's all great. But I don't have a strong feeling either way. What's the plan for, getting, I guess, more public input? Are we going out to the public again to kind of get some feedback on all these plans, or what's the next steps?
Sure. So the first step in that, as Mr. Orris had mentioned before, is presenting this concept to the leadership in town, and which is tonight, and then releasing it to the public. So it'll be available via download on the town's website. And there'll be time where, you could broadcast and advertise it being on the town's website, the executive summary, which will give time for people to really think about it, and then schedule public hearing where this executive summary will be presented to the public and monitored by town staff and Weston and Sampson representatives. Field questions during that time, and then try to make some sense of it and determine what's really the preferred option here. We can, as part of that meeting, we have some fun ways and opportunities to run like instantaneous polls. We say, if you're tuning in right now, go to this link and vote for option 1, 1B, or 1A, and we could see it live streaming on like who's voting for what. Just as a fun way of keeping the public engaged. And then ultimately, if there's any minor tweaks or changes, we morph the option 1, 1A together, or make some subtle changes to option 2, if that were the desired route, and then finalize the decision.
I think if I could just add, I think, the first step is really getting this out to the public. Obviously, in the COVID world, this is a little more challenging than what we envisioned in terms of bringing everyone in a big room and putting the concepts on boards, but we're going to try to, first of all, advertise that these are out there. I know we contacted the Cheshire Herald, who will be running an article probably next week, but showing the concepts and talking through what we're talking about tonight, and just try to get this in the public eye, and then kind of go to the next stage of engaging and having some of these virtual meetings to hear and get the feedback, just like Ryan was saying. So that's the next phase.
Yeah, can I speak to that if I may? All of these plans obviously have a cost, and initially it appears as though we could spend up to $2.3 million, more or less creating a town green and some other amenities. Then we jumped to this and then a full build out at 14 million. I think realistically, a presentation to the community has to clearly state that we're dealing with, you know, conceptual as well as something that is built out over time. Now, in all of our conversations we've had tonight, we haven't really discussed a phasing, but clearly, I don't believe there's anyone on the council that could contemplate a full build out in a short period of time. Does the plan address phasing
Yes.
in its explanation? Because I think that's critical before you put this thing on the town hopper and it ends up on the Facebook page being obliterated by a cynical public, which I think, you know, we could anticipate. And I, as a taxpayer and a council person, would also feel that we have to be practical here, you know, on the dollar side.
Sure. So those are great questions, and we'll start from concept 1A. On each of these plans, 1A and 1B, we've identified the phase line in red, and then itemized in the cost estimate what's included in that portion. The major advantage of concept 1A or B is that you can not do anything to the rest of the park, but make the improvements to Bartland Park South. And that's what that initial cost estimate was. You know, in that you're making these improvements, you need, it would be very advantageous to have an additional curb cut and additional parking in this site. That's where 1B came into play. We added that parking within here, and we have optional improvements here, should there be an appetite for it in town. But option 1B excludes M4 field improvements and an open air pavilion down in front by the town green. And then a lot of these other improvements really is long-term capital planning. They're not necessary for the implementation of option 1A or 1B. They're just long-term capital expenditures that would be very useful and beneficial to the community. Option 2 is a little bit different in that because you're disrupting 2 of the fields up front, that's a major loss. You would want to replace those. That would trigger the need to displace at least 1 of the 2 fields here.
So that's the jump to 6.3 million.
Right.
Right.
Well,
So
no,
you're
the
basically you're sitting on 2.3 and you go to 6 point something or other if you have the town green on the center essentially, and we replace fields.
Yeah, let me get to those because I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So option 1A, so option 1A, I'll just walk through, is the town green. So that's tree planting, lawn and lighting with circulation paths. The great lawn, that's tree planting, lawn, walkways and lighting. And then that's really it. There's some stormwater management and erosion control and site preparation that needs to happen. So that option 1A cost of 2.3 million is to do all the grading and walkway system within here, the tree plantings, and was it the lighting as well? And lighting of those walkways. So it does not include expanded parking, any of this roadway infrastructure. Option 1B, if we look here, that phase line changes and includes this roadway infrastructure and some other additional options. So let's go to the cost on that So option 1B includes the town green as discussed before, includes the Great Lawn area as discussed before. It includes putting the outdoor entertainment venue, the band shell. It includes a restroom pavilion. It includes the town green and skate park parking and access drive. It includes M4 field lighting, and it includes the memorial walkway and bioretention areas. So to go back to that, it includes lighting around this field, not synthetic turf, but just lighting. All of this parking and circulation in the memorial walkway and infiltration areas.
At a $6 million price tag.
$6 million price tag.
Right.
And then option 2, let's get to the cost now. Option 2 was the full build out of concept 2, and that was the 14.2. Which included a synthetic turf field, included 2 multi-use baseball, softball fields, basketball courts, nature trails, splash pad, amphitheater, town pavilion, and restroom pavilions, electrical service, additional electrical utilities and water connections, landscaping, and a new skate park surface. Now, if there was an appetite for concept 2, some of the things that potentially can be phased are, if you put the town green up front, you don't necessarily have to put in this roadway infrastructure, although it would be ideal if you're doing this earthwork and movement while you have the machinery out there. The mobilization cost would be beneficial to do that. You don't have to do parking. You essentially don't have to do this whole area here. You would want to do a displacement of softball. So you'd want to do at least one of the fields, and then you can leave this field alone. You don't have to do the turf. You could really only do the town green, and then some circulation paths as well. It's a possibility, but it does require reconstruction of a softball field.
So Ryan, to follow up with Mr. Slocum's questions, I think we could do a better job before this goes public of delineating the phasing that's possible in both proposals. We didn't do it at all in this presentation for proposal number 2, and you've just admitted that you can do that, particularly to include the turf field. And I think your phasing maps that go along with the budgets for phase 1A and B are confusing to me. If you look at concept 1B, if you look at your red outlines, you show the red outlines around the new turf field in the center of the facility, but yet that's not included in the $6 million budget. It's included in the next budget, which gets you to 14.8 million. So I just think Mr. Slocum raised a very relevant point. We need to be very clear to the community of what we're proposing and how we're proposing it. And I think that this thing absolutely has to be able to be done in phases. I don't believe there's going to be an appetite, I could be wrong, for a one-phase $14 million project. So it seems to me that this is going to have to happen over a period of a number of years and be building towards the inevitable final product. So I think we can do a better job in making sure this gets cleaned up to be very clear to the public of what we're proposing.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from members of the council? I can't see everybody, so please just jump in.
Rob?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Nichols, yeah.
Go ahead, yep, go ahead, Sylvia.
No, I concur. That was my question, was we need to be absolutely clear what's included in each of the proposals. And it's like Chinese menu. Can we take one from column A and one from column B? We need to be able to be prepared to talk about the costs. And I agree with you. I doubt there will be an appetite to do the entire thing all at once. So it's really important to make it clear, having been involved in some of these projects over a lot of years. I think this proposal for us was very good, but you're right, it was confusing as to what exactly was included in the variations. So I would support that request to clean that up and make it easier for the public to understand.
Anybody else?
Yep, Sean, Mr. Chairman?
Dave, yep.
So, question, and I agree as well. I think that is important because I think Tim brings up a very good point. Once these go public and people are saying, "Oh my God, this is going to be a $15 million project," and they're not, or this is going to be $6 million. It needs to be very clear as to what those projects, what those concepts, contemplate. Because even option 1A, if you just look at 1A, people are seeing some of the other options. They're gonna say, well, how come that's only 2.3 million and everything else is 6 million or 14 million? So it needs to be very clear. But I just, going back to just a couple things on the map, and it brought my attention to it. One of the things that Peter had mentioned earlier on option 1A was the bioswale. Could you, I see that down there by the town green right along Route 10, and what exactly is a bioswale, and what's the importance of that? And I know it caught my attention because Peter mentioned the idea of being able to see the town green from the road, and even if you get rid of those trees, does that bioswale interfere with that somehow? So what I assume it's obviously just a catch basin, but I was just curious if you could explain it a little bit, what the bioswale is supposed to do down there.
Yeah, the bioswale right now, it actually it is a low point along Route 10, and it almost currently functions as a bioswale. And it's just a water catchment area for filtration. So
is it like a rain garden? I mean, is it contemplated like a rain garden?
Yeah, similar to a rain garden.
Okay. And then my other question is
go ahead. Which is dry 90% of the time.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And then my other question goes to in all the concepts on these plans, we talk about there's a veterans memorial back there in the on the south edge of the corner. And could you just talk a little bit about that? I mean, obviously that's something I think is important, but obviously I just want to make sure where it came from. What's the and is that it's a nice quiet. Is it there because it's a nice quiet place to put it? And what's I just want to learn a little bit more about the concept of having a veterans memorial there. I think it's a great idea. I don't know, did it show up on your on your planning and your wish list, but I think it's a great idea. I'm just curious a little bit more about it and where you came up with the idea for location there. And
Ryan, I can probably just take that to start. Early on in the process, Leslie Marinero and the rest of the Veterans Council reached out with their desire that we find kind of a permanent home for a Veterans Memorial, a new Veterans Memorial in town that has an area for sort of more contemplation and the ability to that maybe the other locations in town don't afford quite to the same level. They were looking for an area that you could go kind of a little farther off of Route 10. And so, again, this is not indicative of exactly what the size of it or what it would look like or the design or anything, of course, but we were trying to be responsive to their request. And obviously Cheshire has a very proud history, Medal of Honor and veterans, honoring our veterans locally. And I think that was something we were trying to be sensitive to and find a spot. And that looked like there was a natural spot in all of the plans, frankly, to have one. So
Right. No, and
that's where
I
that came from.
appreciate that. I think that's a great idea. And I think that's, it's a wonderful addition to the park and, and a great addition to the town. I just wanted to make sure what the impetus was for that. And also where would that be replacing, what is there something that now, a place that would no longer be a memorial that, are we talking about the one near the town hall? Are we talking about the Medal of Honor? Are we going to move the Medal of Honor place back here as well? Is that going to stay up closer to the front of Bartland Park?
I think, oops, hold on. Hold on.
Sean, did you?
Can you hear me okay?
Now I can hear you. Yep.
Sorry, I don't know. I lost my muting ability there. No, I don't think that the plans didn't get that specific in terms of replacing. I think that would be decided at a later time. It depends on whether that addition was approved in the master plan. That might inform those discussions. But I don't think there was a specific trade-off in mind. It was more just a request for another location and one that, again, might be a little farther from Route 10 as opposed to where the others are located.
Right on there. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I'm all in favor of the idea. I just wanted to make sure how that played into the plan. So thank you very much for that update. Thanks, Sean.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks, Mr. Veliver. Anybody else with questions or comments? Not hearing anybody. Just a couple quick comments from myself. I will not ask any questions. I was very fortunate to attend some of these working sessions, which included obviously staff from Sampson, Weston, and Sampson, as well as Park and Rec. I know Doc Duffy was there, Mike O'Donnell was there, and a number of other people participated in getting to this point. I want to thank them all for their hard work. As we mentioned in the beginning, folks, this is really just the beginning. And I'm really looking forward, as well as I'm sure the rest of you are, to get some public input and comment on what we're seeing. So, this is really just the start. I know we all have a lot of thoughts and questions, and we're all going to have a lot more before this thing comes to fruition. But I'm really anxious to hear what the public will say about these designs once they've already given us kind of the litany of things that they would like to see. I think the professionals did a great job of including a lot of what was mentioned. I think we all really like the green areas that were created on what is currently a very beautiful Chapman property. And I think many of us thought that we really don't want to decimate that in any material way. We want to accentuate and take advantage of the beauty of that parcel. And I think we all see it as it sits today with the meandering trail the park or Public Works put in there. It's really beautiful property. And I think this design, both of these really take advantage of that and accentuate that. So I really commend you guys for working hard on it. Looking forward to the next phase of this thing with more public input. And we got a long way to go. I know it's much more difficult because of COVID, folks. And I think we all apologize to the public. We wish we could have moved this along a little quicker. But nonetheless, COVID hit and it really put a slow start to a lot of this. So that's where the reality of where we are today. But it looks great. And thank you to everybody who participated. If there's no other questions or comments, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding the amended job descriptions. It does say possible executive session. Yes, Ryan, I'm sorry, you raised your hand.
I'm just going to say, I don't think I'm needed for this portion of the town council meeting. So I'll say thank you. And John and Sean and others, we should be in touch about delineating those phase lines and costs to make it more clear.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll talk tomorrow.
I'm sure you
Thanks,
guys
Ryan.
can collaborate on what's best to roll this out to the public so that it's most effective. We don't want it to be confusing for a lot of reasons. I think we need clarity with this project. So, appreciate you cleaning that up a little bit. And thank you, Ryan, for being here tonight. We appreciate it. John Golak, thank you for being here as well.
Thanks for the feedback.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. Again, moving on to discussion of possible action regarding amended job descriptions. It calls for possible executive session. I don't think we need it. We have talked about this. So unless there's anyone that thinks we need to go into executive session, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution that I would like to propose. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 102720-1. Be it resolved that the town council approves the following job descriptions as presented and attached pursuant to the recommendation of the Personnel Committee. And the three job descriptions are Capital Projects Manager, Assistant Town Manager / PIO, and Town Manager Administrative Assistant.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate it. Ms. Nichols?
We've discussed this extensively in council meetings and in executive session before. This is just developing some new descriptions for positions. Sean, do you want to enumerate anything? Is there anything for the public's benefit that would be important to talk about? The capital.
No, I think, yeah, just that we've, we discussed these, again, some of them dating back really to the budget, because these were all provided for in the existing operating budget from a funding standpoint. The capital projects manager position, just to remind folks, is actually a shared position. We're sharing the funding with the Board of Education. It will be reporting to the Public Works Director, but this is, I think, an opportunity, as we know, to support the great work of the PBC and staff and the council as we try to advance a lot of our capital projects and capital renovation projects with that sometimes span both the town and school projects, and also with school modernization on the horizon. A lot more to come, and I think this is an important position that continues that much needed communication between the town and the Board of Ed. I think we've made a lot of great strides there, and I think this is a very important position that will be promoting the assistant town engineer position, getting rid of that position and moving the person into the capital projects manager position. And then the other two positions I think we've talked about before, reorganization of some of the reporting requirements within my office for the assistant town manager, and then some technical changes to the administrative assistant position just to reflect the changes and the reporting there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nichols, and thank you, Mr. Kimball. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council on this resolution? Seeing none, I'll make just a quick statement. I just want to say that I'm really happy to see the job description change for the assistant town manager, public information officer. I think it's long overdue. And I know we're talking about a particular position, but I think this position better reflects the duties of what we have that position doing. And I think it allows, Sean, as we've talked, and many of the council have talked, that it allows you in this position to really spend more time focusing on the big picture, long-term strategy, really important things that impact our community, and to get, to a certain extent, both of those positions, you and this position, out of the weeds a little bit. I know it's not easy to do that entirely, but I think it does that to a certain extent. And certainly I'm going to support all of these, but I really, really am happy to see the restructure of this assistant town manager position. I think it's much more appropriate, more reflective of the work that's done in that position. And I'm glad to see it in front of us. So thank you for bringing this forward, Sean. With
Well,
that,
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the. Oh, I just want to say I appreciate the
I'm
council's
sorry,
support on
Sean. Go
this.
ahead.
We do. No, it's all right. I think I have a delay, but I just wanted to say I appreciate the council's support on this, and I agree it's the beginning of some more to come, and I really do appreciate the conversation and our direction on this. So thank you.
Yeah, I think this is good for good governance, good for your department, and good for the community. So with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Mr. Talbot, I was wondering if I was going to have to ask again. It looks like the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And I guess the only other item I would throw out there tonight is, Ms. Talbot, do we have any public comment or any public messages, anything that's come in to the town?
You do not. I have been monitoring the public Zoom account, and also the emails, and there have been no comments submitted.
Okay, well, I guess that concludes our meeting for tonight. I thank you all for attending this special meeting and look forward to seeing you in another couple of weeks on our regular scheduled meeting. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum.
Second. Second.
Mr. Jinks, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. I thank you all for being here